Chidi, please wake up. You know I cannot hurt you. Don't leave me like this.
You have killed him, witch!
No, Maduka, what are you saying?
Don't pretend! You think we don't see?
I swear I know nothing!
Leave me. I did nothing.
Witch! Husband killer!
You have killed him, witch. Maduka's voice exploded into the room as he burst in, eyes blazing with a fury that felt too sudden, too certain. Uche staggered back, clutching Chidi's lifeless body, her hands trembling uncontrollably. "No, Maduka, no! What are you saying?" she cried, her voice breaking as she shook her head in disbelief. "Don't lie," he roared, pointing at her. "You have finally killed my brother." Uche let out a piercing wail, shaking Chidi desperately. "Chidi, please wake up. Please don't do this to me." But his body remained cold and still. Just then, Ineka rushed in, her breath heavy, her wrapper loose, and the moment she saw her son, she collapsed beside him, screaming, "My son! My son!" Her cry echoed, then suddenly stopped as her eyes slowly turned to Uche, hard and filled with hatred. You have killed him." "Mama, I didn't," Uche sobbed, crawling toward her. "I swear, I know nothing." "Shut up," Ineka snapped, rising in anger as villagers flooded the compound, drawn by the noise. Murmurs spread like wildfire. "She killed him. I always suspected her. Witch." Rough hands grabbed Uche, dragging her outside as she screamed, reaching back toward her husband. "Leave me! I did nothing!" They threw her into the center of the compound as insults rained down. "Witch! Husband killer!" Her children cried helplessly from a distance, calling for her, but no one listened. That night, they forced her into the same room with Chidi's corpse. The door shut, leaving her in darkness and silence. Uche slowly moved closer, her body shaking as she touched his cold skin, tears pouring endlessly. "Chidi," she whispered, laying her head on him. "Please wake up. You know I cannot hurt you. Don't leave me like this." But only silence answered her cries. Before we continue this old legendary tale, support this channel by subscribing and tell me, why are women always blamed when a husband dies? Share your thoughts in the comment section. Now come with me as I take you through this powerful story. Uche was the kind of woman people noticed without trying. The kind whose beauty did not beg for attention, yet commanded it effortlessly. Her skin glowed like the early morning sun. Her smile soft but unforgettable. And when she walked through the village, conversations paused, heads turned, and whispers followed her behind like shadows. "Is that not Nwanko's daughter?" one woman would murmur. Beauty like that can cause trouble," another would reply, not hiding the envy beneath her tone. Some admired her openly, praising her grace, while others watched her with narrowed eyes, measuring her, judging her, waiting for a flaw that never seemed to come. The older women, however, added their own flavor of humor to the tension. "Hey, you men, better control your eyes, oh," one of them would shout playfully, adjusting her wrapper, as her husband tried to sneak a glance. "If you look at that girl too long, you will forget the road to your own house." Laughter would follow, but beneath it lay a quiet truth. Uche had a presence that unsettled even the confident. Yet for all her beauty, it was her character that truly set her apart. She greeted every elder with respect, bending slightly, her voice calm and warm. "Good morning, Mama. Good afternoon, Papa." And no matter how harsh the response, she never talked back. She worked tirelessly, fetching water, tending to chores, carrying herself with a quiet dignity that made it impossible to accuse her of pride. But kindness does not always win hearts, and in the shadows of admiration grew silent resentment, especially from one woman who never bothered to hide it, Neka, Chidi's mother. From the very first day her eyes rested on Uche, something within her hardened. She would watch her closely, lips pressed tight, as if searching for something, anything, to justify the dislike that burned quietly in her chest. "That girl," she would mutter under her breath, shaking her head slightly, though she never explained why. Then there was Chidi, a man whose heart seemed to beat in rhythm with Uche's very existence. Hardworking, respected, and known for his calm spirit, yet completely undone by love. From the moment he chose Uche, it was as if the world narrowed down to just her. Their love was not hidden, it was alive, playful, and full of laughter that echoed through the village. Chidi, will you not let this girl breathe? His friends would tease as he trailed behind her like a shadow. Leave her small, let her miss you. But Chidi would only laugh, scratching his head. Why should she miss me when I am here? Uche would roll her eyes, trying to hide her smile. Go and do your work, people are watching, she would whisper, but her voice carried no real protest. Their bond was simple, pure, and annoyingly sweet to those who did not understand it. When the day of their marriage came, the village gathered in celebration. Drums echoed, laughter filled the air, and joy seemed to overflow from every corner. Uche glowed brighter than ever, and Chidi could not take his eyes off her, smiling like a man who had found his entire world in one person. Yet, even in the middle of that happiness, not every heart rejoiced. Among the crowd stood Neka, her face stiff, her eyes cold, her lips refusing to curve into even the smallest smile. While others danced, she remained still. While others celebrated, she only watched. And though no words were spoken, her silence said everything.
When Uche gave birth to her first child, a beautiful baby girl they named Adaize, the compound echoed with joy, at least from one man. Chidi danced like a child who had just been handed the world, lifting the baby gently and smiling from ear to ear. "My daughter, my princess," he exclaimed, his voice full of pride. But behind him, the reactions were different. His mother, Neka, forced a thin smile that never reached her eyes, while a few relatives exchanged glances that spoke louder than words. "It is well," someone muttered quietly, as though comforting themselves. Uche noticed, but she said nothing, holding her child close, choosing to focus on the warmth of her husband's joy. When the second child came, another girl, Chiamaka, the murmurs began to grow. Another one? Maybe next time, they whispered, shaking their heads. Uche heard every word, each one settling heavily in her chest, though she tried to hide it behind a brave face. By the time Oblagili, the third daughter, arrived, the whispers had turned into open criticism. Neka no longer pretended. "So this is it?" she snapped one afternoon, her voice sharp with disappointment. "Is it only girls you came to give my son?" Uche lowered her eyes, her fingers tightening around her wrapper, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mama, Don't speak," Neka cut her off, waving her hand dismissively. "A home without a son is like a tree without roots." That night, when the house had grown quiet, Uche sat beside Chidi, her eyes heavy with unshed tears. Maybe I am failing you," she said softly, her voice trembling despite her effort to remain strong. Chidi turned to her immediately, his face filled with disbelief. "Failing me? Uche, what are you saying?" She looked away, her voice breaking. "I have not given you a son, your family." "My family is not God," he interrupted firmly, his tone gentle but unyielding. He cupped her face, forcing her to look at him. "Are you God? Did you sit in heaven and choose daughters?" Uche let out a weak, tearful laugh, shaking her head. "Then why do you blame yourself?" he continued softly, wiping her tears. "These girls, they are my pride." And he meant it, not just in words, but in actions that often left the entire compound shaking their heads in disbelief. On some mornings, Chidi would sit with his daughters between his legs, attempting to braid their hair with all the confidence of a professional, only to produce results that looked like something from a masquerade festival. "Papa, this one is too tight," Adaize would cry. "Beauty requires sacrifice," he would reply proudly, adjusting a crooked braid that stood like a stubborn branch. Uche would stand at the doorway, laughing despite herself. "Chidi, what have you done to these children?" "I am making them unique," he would say boldly,
admiring his work, while the girls looked like tiny masquerades ready for a festival they did not understand. But while laughter filled his home, bitterness brewed elsewhere. Maduka, Chidi's older brother, watched it all with a heart that had long turned sour. Nothing in his life seemed to work. His farm struggled season after season, yielding crops that looked as tired as he did. His wife Ngozi never missed a chance to remind him of his failures, her voice sharp and relentless. "Other men are building houses. You are here counting losses," she would shout, hands on her waist, while their 4 sons ran wild around the compound, loud, stubborn, and completely out of control. "Hey, stop that!" Maduka would yell, chasing them half-heartedly as they ignored him completely. One evening, after a long day of frustration, he sat outside watching his sons devour food like hungry goats, spilling more than they ate, and he shook his head in disgust. "These boys," he grumbled bitterly, "they eat like goats but think like empty calabashes." His gaze drifted toward Chidi's home, where laughter echoed freely, where peace seemed to live, where love grew effortlessly. Chidi had everything: success, respect, a beautiful wife, well-behaved children, and the comparison bond deeply. What began as a quiet resentment slowly took root, growing stronger, darker, feeding on every failure, every insult, every moment of comparison, until jealousy no longer whispered. It waited. The night was thick and quiet, broken only by the dull clink of clay cups as Maduka sat with his friend Okechukwu, both men surrounded by the heavy smell of palm wine and unspoken thoughts. Maduka took a long drink, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand, his eyes distant, restless. "Tell me, Okechukwu," he began slowly, his voice rough with bottled frustration. "Have you ever looked at your own blood and wished he was gone?" Okechukwu did not answer immediately. Instead, he watched him carefully, as though weighing every word before it was spoken. Maduka laughed bitterly, shaking his head. "My younger brother, everything he touches prospers. His farm yields more than mine. His home is filled with peace. His children," he paused, scoffing, "even his daughters behave better than my sons." He leaned forward, his voice dropping into something darker, something raw. "And that wife of his, Uche, as if the gods carved her with their own hands. Meanwhile, look at my life." His grip tightened around the cup, his jaw clenching. "Sometimes I hate him. I hate him so much it scares me." Silence stretched between them before Okechukwu finally leaned closer, his voice low, almost a whisper. "Then why not end it?" Maduka froze, his breath catching. "What did you say?" Okechukwu's lips curved slightly, not in amusement, but in something far more dangerous. "You think you are the first man to feel this way?" he asked quietly. Then after a brief pause, he added, "I had a brother once." Maduka frowned, confusion flashing across his face. "Had?" Okechukwu nodded slowly, his eyes steady, unblinking. "I handled it." The words fell like a stone into deep water. Maduka stared at him, shock washing over his face, his voice barely forming. What do you mean?" Okechukwu leaned even closer, his whisper now sharp and chilling. "He stood in my way. Now he does not." For a moment, the world seemed to go still. No laughter, no sound, just the weight of what had been said pressing down on Maduka's chest. Fear flickered in his eyes, mixing with something else, something darker. "There are ways," Okechukwu continued, his tone calm, almost casual. "But once you start, you don't return. You cannot cry halfway." Maduka swallowed hard, his fingers trembling slightly around his cup, his mind racing, battling between fear and desire. He hesitated, his voice uncertain. This is not a small thing." Okechukwu nodded, as if expecting the hesitation. It is not. But your suffering, is it small? That question lingered, heavy and suffocating. Maduka's breathing grew slower, deeper, his thoughts settling into a dangerous clarity. He closed his eyes briefly, then opened them with a resolute that had not been there before. Take me, he said quietly. The journey to the shrine was silent, the air around them thick with unease. When they arrived, the Dibia, Nwafo, sat waiting as though he had been expecting them all along, his presence calm, yet unsettling. Before either of them could speak, his voice cut through the silence, low and certain. You want your brother gone. Maduka's heart skipped, his eyes widening in shock as he instinctively took a step back. I did not say anything, he stammered, his voice betraying his fear. Nwafo's gaze remained steady, almost piercing. You did not need to. The room seemed to grow colder as Maduka slowly sat down, his body tense, his mind racing. The Dibia leaned forward slightly, his tone now heavier, deliberate. What you seek is possible, but nothing comes without a price. Maduka swallowed, his throat dry. What price? Nwafo's eyes darkened. Your brother's spirit is not weak. If you do not do what is required, he will not rest, and he will come for you. A chill ran down Maduka's spine, but he said nothing. The Dibia reached beside him and brought out a small charm, placing it carefully before Maduka. You will take him out for a drink, he instructed slowly, and you will add this to his drink. He will sleep, and he will not wake. Maduka's hands trembled slightly as he picked it up. It must look natural, Nwafo continued, his voice steady. No suspicion must fall on you. He paused, then added, the blame must fall on his wife. Maduka's eyes flickered, a brief hesitation crossing his face, but he remained silent. When he dies, the Dibia went on, they will accuse her. She will sleep in the same room with his corpse. In the morning, his body will be bathed, and she must drink the water. The words hung in the air, heavy, disturbing, final. That is how his spirit will be tied. That is how he will not rise against you. The room fell into a deep, eerie silence, broken only by the sound of Maduka's unsteady breathing. For a brief moment, doubt flickered in his eyes. Then slowly it disappeared, swallowed by something far darker. He tightened his grip on the charm, his voice low, almost hollow. I understand.
The evening felt unusually calm, as though the world itself had decided to rest. And for the first time in a long while, Chidi and Maduka sat together, side by side, sharing drinks like brothers who had finally put their differences behind them. Chidi lifted his cup, smiling warmly, his eyes filled with genuine relief. My brother, he said, his voice soft but full of joy. Peace has finally returned. This is how it should be. Maduka forced a laugh, raising his own cup, though his fingers tightened slightly around it. Yes, peace, he echoed, his voice steady, but his eyes avoiding Chidi's for just a moment too long. Chidi noticed nothing. He leaned back, relaxed, taking a deep drink. You don't know how happy this makes me. We have wasted too much time. Life is too short for brothers to live like strangers. Maduka nodded, a faint smile on his lips, masking the storm beneath. You are right, he said quietly. Chidi reached out, placing a hand on his shoulder, a gesture filled with trust, with love. No matter what happens, you are my brother. That will never change. For a brief second, something flickered in Maduka's eyes, something almost like hesitation, but it vanished as quickly as it came. He forced another laugh, louder this time, lifting his cup again. Drink, Chidi. Tonight we celebrate. And Chidi did. He drank freely, happily, unaware that each sip carried something far darker than brotherhood. When he finally rose to leave, he clapped Maduka on the back, smiling brightly. I will see you tomorrow, he said. Rest well, my brother. Maduka watched him mop away, his expression slowly hardening as the night swallowed Chidi's figure. Yes, rest well, he muttered under his breath. When Chidi returned home, the warmth of his house welcomed him like always. Uche looked up as he entered, her face lighting up instantly. "You are back," she said, smiling as she moved toward him. He replied, dropping down to sit, stretching his legs. "And I bring good news. Your husband and his brother are now friends again." Uche laughed softly, shaking her head. "I will believe it when I see it tomorrow." "Ah, woman, don't doubt me," Chidi teased, pulling her gently closer.
They ate together, shared quiet laughter, and for a moment, everything felt right. Later that night, as they lay side by side, Uche turned slightly, her eyes resting on his face. He looked peaceful, calm, like a man without burdens. She smiled faintly, reaching out to adjust his wrapper, her fingers lingering for a moment. "You work too hard," she whispered softly, though he was already drifting into sleep. She watched him for a while longer, her heart full, before finally closing her eyes. Morning came quietly, but something was wrong. Uche stirred, blinking slowly as she turned toward Chidi. "Chidi," she called softly, nudging him lightly. No response. She frowned slightly, pushing him again, a bit firmer this time. "Chidi, wake up. The sun is already up." Still nothing. A strange unease crept into her chest. She sat up, her hands moving to his shoulder, shaking him gently at first, then harder. "Chidi!" Her voice rose slightly, edged with fear. His body felt wrong, cold, stiff. Her breath caught as panic gripped her suddenly. "Chidi!" she cried, shaking him violently now, her voice breaking. "Wake up! Stop this!" But his body did not move, did not respond, did not breathe. The realization hit her like a blow. A piercing scream tore from her throat, raw and uncontrollable, shaking the walls of the compound. "Chidi!" Her cry echoed, loud and desperate, sending a wave of alarm through the household. Small footsteps rushed in as the children burst into the room, their faces filled with confusion and fear. "Mama, what is it?" Adiaze asked, her voice trembling as she looked between her mother and her father's still form. Uche could not answer. She clung to Chidi, shaking him again and again, tears pouring uncontrollably, her voice breaking into desperate sobs. "Wake up! Please, wake up!" The children began to cry, their small voices rising in panic as they watched their mother fall apart, not fully understanding what was happening, but feeling the terror in the air. The room filled with chaos, cries, confusion, fear. Yet in the middle of it all, Chidi lay still, silent, unmoving, as though he had already gone too far to hear them.
"You have killed him, witch!" Maduka's voice crashed into the room as he burst in, his eyes wild, his breath heavy, as though he had been waiting for this moment. Uche froze, still clinging to Chidi's lifeless body, her tears flowing uncontrollably. "No, no, Maduka, what are you saying?" she stammered, her voice shaking. "Don't pretend," he shouted, pointing at her accusingly. "You think we don't see? You have been waiting for this." Uche shook her head violently, her voice breaking into panic. "I swear, I know nothing. He just slept. He did not wake up." But Maduka only laughed bitterly, a harsh, hollow sound. "And you expect us to believe that?" Before she could speak again, a loud wail filled the air as Neka rushed into the room, her wrapper loose, her face already wet with tears. The moment she saw her son lying still, she collapsed beside him, clutching his body, screaming, my son, who has done this to you?" Her cries pierced the air, heavy with pain. But then, slowly, she lifted her head, her eyes falling on Uche, and something changed. The grief twisted into anger, deep and burning. "You," she whispered, rising slowly, her voice trembling with rage. "You have killed my son." "Mama, no," Uche cried, crawling toward her, her hands shaking. "I did nothing, I swear."
"Shut up," Neka snapped, stepping back as though Uche's presence itself was poison. "From the day you entered this house, I knew you would destroy it." The noise had already drawn people in. Villagers began to gather, filling the compound with murmurs and curious eyes. What happened? Chidi is dead. Dead? How? Maduka did not hesitate, his voice loud and firm, cutting through the confusion. "Ask his wife. She killed him." The murmurs exploded instantly. I knew it. That quiet face. Did she not only give birth to girls? Rough hands grabbed Uche, pulling her away from the body as she screamed, reaching out desperately. "Leave me! Let me stay with him! I did nothing!" They dragged her outside and threw her into the center of the compound.
The insults came quickly, sharp and merciless. "Witch! Husband killer! Confess!" Her daughter stood at the edge, crying uncontrollably, their small voices shaking, "Mama, Mama," but no one listened. Some women, eager for drama, began adding their own stories. "I remember one day she looked at him somehow," one said loudly. "Yes, and last week she refused to greet me well. That is how these things start," another added, nodding seriously. "I even saw her talking to herself one evening," a third woman chimed in, her voice full of importance. "Talking to herself? It is finished." The crowd gasped as though the matter had been confirmed beyond doubt. Uche shook her head weakly, her voice breaking. "All of you, you are lying. I have done nothing." But her words drowned in the noise of accusations. Night came, but her suffering did not end. They dragged her back into the room and pushed her down beside Chidi's lifeless body. Maduka stood at the doorway, his face cold, his voice firm. "You will stay here with him. If you are innocent, let him speak for you." The door shut, leaving her alone in the heavy silence. Uche's body trembled as she slowly turned toward Chidi, fear gripping her, yet love pulling her closer. She reached out hesitantly, touching his cold arm, then quickly pulled back with a gasp, before forcing herself to move nearer. Tears streamed down her face as she laid her head gently on his chest, her voice barely a whisper. "Chidi, please wake up, please." Her hands clutched his wrapper as her voice broke into sobs. "They are lying against me. You know me. You know I cannot hurt you." She shook him again weakly, desperation filling every word. "Say something. Defend me. Don't leave me alone in this." But the room remained silent, heavy and unmoving, her cries echoing softly against the walls as she held on to him, the cold truth pressing deeper into her heart with every passing moment. Morning came without mercy, the pale light creeping into the compound as if even the sun was hesitant to witness what was about to happen. Inside the room, women moved around Chidi's lifeless body, their voices low, their faces hard, preparing him for burial. Water was poured into a large basin, herbs added, hands dipping and lifting as they bathed him slowly, carefully, as tradition demanded. Uche sat in a corner, her eyes swollen from a night without sleep, her body weak, her spirit already breaking, watching them touch her husband in a way she no longer could. Then one of the women spoke sharply, "Bring her." Two others stepped forward immediately, grabbing Uche by the arms and dragging her toward the center. "No, please, leave me," she cried weakly, trying to pull away, her legs barely able to support her weight. The basin of murky water was placed before her. "Drink it," Neka said coldly, her voice empty of any trace of the grief she had shown earlier. Uche's eyes widened in horror, her head shaking frantically. "No, Mama, please. I did nothing. Please don't do this to me." "If you are innocent, drink it," another woman added, folding her arms. "Let the truth speak." Uche fell to her knees, her voice breaking into desperate sobs. "I beg you, I beg all of you, I did not kill him." But their faces remained unmoved.
Hands gripped her tightly, forcing her closer as she struggled weakly, her cries growing louder, more frantic. Please, please! One woman held her head, another tilted the bowl. Drink, they commanded. Uche turned her face away, but they forced it back. The foul water pushed against her lips. She gagged, shaking her head, tears streaming uncontrollably, but they did not stop. The liquid was forced into her mouth, spilling, choking her as she cried and coughed, her body trembling violently. The taste, the humiliation, the pain, it crushed something deep inside her, something that would never fully heal. When they finally released her, she collapsed onto the ground, coughing, crying, her entire body shaking, as though her soul had been torn apart. Not long after, Chidi was buried. The earth hitting the grave echoed heavily, each thud final, each one sealing a life that had once been full of laughter. Uche stood at a distance, supported by no one, her eyes fixed on the grave, empty, broken. Then came another cruelty. They sat her down and began to shave her hair. Strands fell to the ground one after another, her beauty stripped away piece by piece as she sat silently, tears sliding down her face. A white cloth was wrapped around her body, plain and unforgiving, marking her as a widow, marking her shame in the eyes of those who had already judged her. But it did not end there. Before the dust had even settled on Chidi's grave, Maduka moved into his brother's house as though he had always belonged there. His voice rang with authority as he gave orders. Move this here, that stays there. His wife Ngozi followed closely behind, inspecting everything with a sharp eye. Uche stood quietly with her children, watching as their home was taken from them piece by piece. Then Maduka turned to her, his expression cold, final. You cannot stay here, he said flatly. Uche blinked slowly, her voice barely audible. Where should we go? He pointed toward the back dismissively. There. She followed his finger and her heart sank. The goats shed. From today, that is where you and your children will stay. Her daughters clung to her wrapper, their small faces filled with confusion and fear as they were led away. The goats, already inside, shifted uneasily as the new neighbors arrived. One bleated loudly, jumping back as though protesting. Another nudged the child's leg curiously before stepping away again. Even in that moment of deep sorrow, the absurdity hung in the air, goats staring at humans as if asking who had truly lost their place. Uche sank slowly to the ground inside the shed, pulling her children close as tears rolled silently down her face, her world reduced to dust, pain, and a silence that felt far heavier than any words. Days passed, but for Uche, each one felt heavier than the last, stretching endlessly between hunger, humiliation, and silent endurance. Every morning she woke before the sun, tying her white cloth tightly around her waist, stepping out of the goat shed with a quiet determination that refused to die, no matter how much the world tried to crush it. She searched for whatever she could find, leftover cassava peels, broken greens, anything discarded, and turned scraps into meals with hands that still moved with care, still carried dignity. Mama, is this all? Little Obiageli would ask softly one evening, staring at the small portion before her. Uche forced a gentle smile, brushing her daughter's hair back. Eat it, my child. It will give you strength. Adiaze and Chiamaka sat quietly, eating without complaint, their eyes older than their years, their behavior a quiet echo of the love they were raised with. Even in suffering, they remained respectful, greeting elders who barely acknowledged them, helping their mother without being asked, their discipline standing in sharp contrast to the chaos that had taken over their former home. Some villagers began to notice. See those children, one woman whispered.
Even in this condition, they still behave well. Another nodded slowly. Maybe the mother is not what they said she is. But Uche paid no attention to whispers anymore. Her world had narrowed to survival and the fragile hearts of her children. One evening, when the weight in her chest grew too much to carry, she slipped away quietly and made her way to Chidi's grave, her steps slow, heavy, as though each one carried the burden of everything she had endured. The moment she reached it, she fell to her knees, her body shaking violently as the pain she had been holding back finally broke free. "Chidi," she cried out, her voice raw, torn from deep within her soul. "Why did you leave me like this?" Her hands clutched the earth, her tears soaking into the soil. "Look at what they have done to me, to your children. Is this how it was meant to be?" Her voice rose, filled with anguish, with questions that had no answers. "God, where are you? What did I do to deserve this?" She sobbed uncontrollably, her body bending forward as though the grief itself was too heavy to carry. "Chidi, you know me. You know I cannot hurt you. Speak for me. Defend me. Don't let them destroy me like this." The wind stirred slightly, brushing against her skin, but she did not notice. She wept until her voice grew weak, until her strength faded, until all that remained was a quiet, broken whisper. "Please." And then, in a moment unseen by human eyes, something shifted. The air grew still. From the very ground where he was laid, Chidi's spirit rose silently, unseen, unheard, yet present. He stood there, watching her, his face heavy with a sorrow deeper than death itself. He saw her pain. He heard every word. But Uche, lost in her grief, saw nothing, felt nothing beyond the emptiness in her chest. The world remained unaware, but something had awakened.
The next morning began like any other, quiet, ordinary, unsuspecting, until a scream shattered the air. "Ah! Who is that?" Maduka's voice rang out from inside the compound, sharp with terror, as he stumbled out, clutching his back, his eyes wild with confusion. Then it came again, a forceful strike, swift and unseen. Whip! He jerked forward violently. "Ah! Stop! Stop!" he cried, spinning around, his hands searching the air, but there was nothing there. Another strike landed, harder this time. Whip! "Jesus! Who is beating me?" he screamed, jumping, twisting, falling to his knees as the invisible force lashed him again and again. The compound erupted in confusion as villagers rushed in, drawn by the chaos. "What is happening? Who is chasing him? Is it a spirit?" Maduka rolled on the ground, crying out, his body jerking with each unseen blow. "Please, stop! I beg you!" Whip! "Ah! My back!" he howled, crawling desperately as though trying to escape something only he could feel. Some villagers stepped back in fear, while others exchanged uneasy glances. "Can you see anything?" one man whispered. "I see nothing," another replied, his voice trembling. Amid the tension, a few could not help but react with nervous humor. Maduka being flogged by nothing, running from air, crying like a child. Whip! The strike landed again, sending him sprawling forward. "I will talk! I will talk!" he screamed suddenly, his voice breaking under the weight of fear and pain. The whipping did not stop. "Speak!" someone shouted from the crowd. Maduka's body trembled as he pressed his face to the ground, his voice shaking uncontrollably. "I killed him! I killed my brother!" The crowd gasped as silence fell instantly. Even the air seemed to pause.
I gave him poison, he continued, crying openly now. I took him for a drink. I put it in his cup. He did not know. Whip. Ah, it was not only me, he added quickly, his voice rising in panic. I went to the shrine. The Dibia told me what to do. He said I should blame his wife, that she must sleep with the corpse, that she must drink the water. The villagers murmured loudly now, shock and anger spreading through them like wildfire. So it is true. He did all this for his own brother? Maduka continued, his words tumbling over each other, desperate, broken. I wanted his life, his house, his wife, everything. Please, I beg you, forgive me. Another invisible strike landed, and he screamed, curling into himself. But suddenly, it stopped, just like that. Silence fell heavily across the compound, broken only by Maduka's ragged breathing. News of the confession spread quickly, reaching the ears of the king without delay. Before long, messengers arrived, their presence commanding immediate attention. Maduka, one of them called firmly, you and your household have been summoned. Fear returned to his eyes as he was dragged to face judgment, his family following behind, confused and terrified. The king sat in silence as the story was laid before him. Every detail, every confession, every act of betrayal. His face darkened with each word. When Maduka was brought forward, trembling, unable to meet his gaze, the king's voice cut through the air, firm and final. You have committed a crime not only against your brother, but against the land itself, he declared. Maduka fell to his knees, weeping. My king, have mercy. Silence, the king thundered, his authority shaking the ground beneath them. There will be no mercy for such evil. The crowd watched in tense silence as the judgment was pronounced. You and your entire household are hereby banished, the king continued, his voice cold, unyielding. From this day forward, you shall never set foot on this land again. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Maduka collapsed completely, his body weak, his voice broken. Please, where will we go? But no one answered. His disgrace was complete. As he and his family were led away, the same people who once feared him now watched with hardened eyes, whispering among themselves. Justice had spoken, and this time it had not been silent. When the truth finally settled like dust after a storm, Uche stood in the middle of the same compound where she had once been humiliated. But this time, the silence around her was different, heavy with shame, not accusation. No one could meet her eyes for long. The same voices that had once called her a witch were now quiet, uncertain, almost afraid. Slowly, she was led back into her home, the house that had been taken from her, the place where laughter once lived. She stepped inside with careful, measured steps, her fingers brushing against familiar walls, her heart tightening with memories, pain, and something else, strength. This time, no one stopped her. This time, no one questioned her place. She did not speak much. She simply began again, picking up what was left of her husband's legacy, tending to the home, the land, the responsibilities he had once carried, her quiet resilience speaking louder than any words could. Then came Nneka. She approached slowly, her steps unsure, her pride completely shattered, her face lined with regret that could no longer be hidden. For a moment, she said nothing, just stood there, staring at Uche, as though searching for the right words that refused to come. Then suddenly, she fell to her knees. Uche, her voice broke, trembling under the weight of guilt. Forgive me. Uche froze, her breath catching slightly as she turned to look at her. Neka's tears fell freely now, her hands shaking. I wronged you. I did not listen. I chose anger over truth. I called you names. Her voice cracked completely as she lowered her head. I destroyed you with my own hands. The silence stretched between them, thick and emotional. Uche's eyes softened, not with weakness, but with understanding, born from pain. She stepped forward slowly, her voice calm, steady. Mama, stand up. Neka shook her head, unable to rise. I do not deserve it. Stand up, Uche repeated gently, reaching out and lifting her. Their eyes met, one filled with regret, the other with quiet strength. What has been done cannot be undone, she said softly, but we can choose what happens next. Neka broke down again, this time not in anger, but in release, and Uche pulled her into an embrace that carried both forgiveness and closure. Time passed, and with it, healing came in quiet, steady steps. Uche raised her daughters with the same love and discipline she had always shown, but now with a strength forged through suffering. Adaze grew wise beyond her years, Chiamaka kind and thoughtful, Obiageli bold and full of life. They became known across the village not just for their beauty, but for their character, their respect, their grace. And slowly, the same villagers who once mocked them began to speak differently. Have you seen Uche's daughters? One woman would say, adjusting her wrapper. Ah, those girls are something else, another would reply. So well behaved. A third would nod eagerly. If only my own children can be like them. Somewhere nearby, an older woman would scoff playfully. Is it not the same girls you people said were useless before? The group would laugh awkwardly, trying to hide their embarrassment. People can change their minds, one would mutter quickly, avoiding eye contact, and the laughter would grow louder, carrying both humor and truth. And through it all, Uche remained who she had always been, strong, quiet, unshaken. Her story became more than just a tale of suffering. It became a reminder whispered across generations that justice may delay, but it never disappears. And the truth, no matter how deeply buried, will always find a voice, even from the grave.